Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Gitcast podcast with me, Gitbag the Great. Like last week's episode of the Gitcast podcast, this episode will be a solo video of just me by myself, no guest co-presenters this week, like, say, for example, Flash Suppressor or anyone else like that. Just me again, I'm afraid, so unfortunately you'll have to put up with my silly old self like always. But today I've got something a little bit different, because usually in the background for these podcasts I've got gameplay footage of World of Tanks, whereas this time decided to switch up a little bit and play some World of Warships instead. I did take on a good criticism from one of my good YouTube friends who suggested to me in the comments of my previous episode of the Gitcast podcast that I should try and take greater care and attention of like the sound of the gameplay in the background when I do these podcasts, and he's kind of got a point. Well, no, he has got a point, because when you think about it, the main thing you're listening to a podcast for is, of course, the people in it talking about whatever they're talking about in that given podcast episode, and you can't really hear that properly if, say, for example, there's a bunch of gameplay from whatever it may be, whether it be Overwatch, World of Tanks, World of Warships, whatever, that is blotting out some of the noise of the person talking. So I've decided to take that idea and criticism on board, and so from now on, or at least for the next couple of episodes of this podcast series, I'm going to be lowering or either completely muting or just very, very much lowering the sound of the gameplay in the background. So this will be the first episode where the gameplay is muted, so you guys let me know how that is, and we'll see what we can do from there in the future, because I'm sure if like you're listening to a part of the podcast that you think is, oh, this is quite interesting, and then you get blotted out, or the noise of that gets blotted out by some explosions in the background, that could probably get a bit annoying, I can imagine. So I do apologise for that, but if anyone ever has any suggestions for topics or methods of presentation or whatever for these kind of podcasts, leave in the comment section below and I'll see what I can do. Anyway, on to this week's episode. Now, this episode is probably going to be a bit more like a little bits and pieces episode, kind of like an OG episode of Mingles with Jingles or something like that. So if that isn't your type of thing, I totally understand, but not really as many big topics to talk about this week as there was with last week's episode of the Gitcast podcast. Now, there are a couple of things I do want to talk about. First off, as you can see in the background, we've got the new or current Halloween event for World of Warships going on at the moment. It's a very, very peculiar but very fun cooperative battle where you're escorting this demonic carrier ship through these crazily well designed demonic waters, defending it from like catapults and battleships, and I'm not gonna lie, it's quite a lot of fun. And at the end you have to try and get it towards a portal when you're approached by a squad of elite enemy battleships. And if anyone has World of Warships, I'd definitely recommend giving it a try a few times, because it is a really fun game mode. On top of that, I also saw that Wargaming at some point in the near future are going to be adding in warships from the Pan-Asian navies into the game. Now, this may just be something they've been planning to do for a while, but I only got back into playing World of Warships for the first time in several months over the last week or so. So it may just be my own ignorance that means that I am not as knowledgeable about this as some other people. On top of that, I also noticed that there's a Polish warship in the game. Now, it is a premium warship, and considering I don't have that much money at the moment, I haven't been able to get it. I hope to at some point in the future, because it looks good, and me being part Polish, I definitely want in on some of that. So that looks pretty sweet. And another thing I was going to get into is that the person who left the comment in last week's episode of the podcast has suggested they might be making a a video on one of my episodes of my America vlog. I won't say what it is, I'll just leave it as a surprise for you guys, but we'll just wait and see if that comes to fruition. He did explain it to me, and it does sound like a really fun idea. So, we'll just wait and see how that goes. And I mean, he did say he's quite busy at the moment, so it's only sort of like a maybe really at the moment. But that's kind of the case with a lot of things in my life at the moment. It's like there's a lot of things I want to do in regards to like getting new games and technology and equipment to help me with making better videos, but as it is, I don't really have the funds or stuff like that at the moment to really fully commit to that. I'd like to make as good videos as I possibly can, but I just have to make do with what I've got here at the moment, which has served me reasonably well so far in my YouTube career, ever since at least I started learning how to fully appreciate editing, ever since I think it was the 12th episode of my Star Wars Jedi Academy playthrough. But it's kind of just been a long trial and error process, actually, from before that point, after that point, and then up till now. In fact, coming to think about it, that episode of the Star Wars Jedi Academy playthrough, I believe it might have been episode 12 probably, was the first video on my channel where I fully started really appreciating taking time to edit videos, like gameplay videos and vlogs and stuff, and the quality that could be enhanced from doing that sort of thing on the regular. Because if you just leave your videos as completely unedited, if they're not videos like a big podcast or a emergency update video, then not many people are going to watch them. Like I said, it's a bit different, I feel, with like emergency update videos and podcasts and stuff like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, for the most part, you should try and sort of do your best to adapt and try your hardest with the content that you make if you are doing it on, well, really anywhere, on YouTube, Blogger, VidMe, anything really. I think effort does count for a lot in making good content online in a general sense, and not just on YouTube, because the more quality you put into it, the more you accentuate what you're trying to go for in your content and the strengths that you are bringing to your content as well as an individual. I myself, I guess I'm still trying to find out what exact qualities I have in terms of online content, at least in terms of YouTube, because I've been doing YouTube now since I think probably late 2013, early 2014, and I've been doing Blogger since like mid 2011. So I still have a lot to learn, I guess, but at the same time, I'm entirely grateful for what I have learned, and the process from, say, 6 or 7 years ago up until now has been immeasurably valuable to me and my experience as a content creator on several platforms here on the internet. And I think this is a case really not just for me, but for every content creator on the internet in all sorts of formats and websites, because at some point or another we're going to have to adapt and learn to appreciate the effort that goes into making high quality content, including painstakingly editing, amending and all other sorts of things in regards to that, because as aggravating as that may be, it's all kind of a process towards making content that is better tuned, not just towards what you're making, but in a general sense as well, because there's two different things between specific quality in regards to what you're aiming for making in regards to your genre of content and on what website you're doing that, but also just general quality content, because not necessarily everyone is going to be into the content that you're making, but you can at the very least try and make it as good of a quality in a general sense as you possibly can, so that if they aren't necessarily into the exact genre or type of content that you are making, you can at least maybe make them think, oh, maybe I might be into that sort of thing. And I think generally putting a lot of effort into your content in general, as well as your specific genre, is definitely a good way of doing that. It's good to get a balance between the two. And one of the ways of doing that, I think, is adapting your content sometimes, like whether that be adapting your genre, adapting your editing style, adapting your attitude, adapting your outlook on content on the internet, as well as your own place on the internet as well. And not only that, but also your own place in the community on the website, in the particular genre that you're in. I've had to do this a few times throughout my YouTube career, and, well, I guess you couldn't really say it a career because I'm still very much small fry, but I have had to do it a few times throughout the time I've been doing videos on YouTube, and also throughout the time I've been doing posts on blogger.com, because the more I've thought about my own place in the community, and not just my own genre quality, but also my own general quality on both of those websites, the more I feel I've improved, not just personally, but also in terms of my content that I produced on both websites. And I think that has helped me a lot in the long run, as well as in the short term, because while in the short term it is requiring of a lot more effort and time, it can be a bit boresome to just continuously work over the same bit of writing or video to make sure it's just right, or at least watchable enough. It will help you in the short term because it will make a more entertaining video or post that more people will see, and on top of that, it'll also help you in the long term because it means that you'll appreciate the effort that you and a lot of other people may put into their content. And I think that has happened to me as well. I did used to have a bit of trouble with fully realising how much effort people put into their content on the internet. Not just on YouTube, but also in terms of just content anywhere, really, whether it be written, video, or alternative forms of content. And like I said, one big part of that I do think is adapting your content, adapting your outlook on content on the internet, and adapting your the majority of your aspects of your personality and your content and the way you make your content. I'm not necessarily, saying change your own actual personality, but sometimes you do have to accommodate for that in regards to what type of content you make on YouTube or the internet in general, in order to help you make better content, really. I've seen people like, say for example, probably the best example of someone learning to adapt themselves that I can think of just immediately off the top of my head to make better content is, let's say, Paracynical. Circa about a year and a half ago, the guy was making decent content, but at the same time he was also probably not really realising his full potential, I would say, in regards to comedic talent and what he could give to the YouTube game. And I'm not going to be one of those people who said he was a copy of Leafy, because I don't think he was. I think if you're going to sort of do similar style or genre of content as someone on the internet, do it. Just either put your own spin on it, or at the very least be the best that you can at that kind of content as humanly possible. And I think Paracynical did the latter to quite a considerable extent. However, he seemed to realise, I think, that over time that kind of content couldn't be sustainable for a long-term career and livelihood on YouTube. And he clearly expressed that emotion and that emphasis quite a few times in his videos towards the latter end of 2016, and I entirely empathise with him, because sometimes it can be hard to break away from a type of content you've been doing on YouTube or any other internet platform for quite some time and then change it either partially, mostly, or entirely. Now, I don't think he changed it entirely, because he's still doing internet commentaries now, but they're much more analytical and heavily edited, and they aren't as frequent as he was doing them, say, a year and a half ago now. But the main sort of point I'm trying to get at here is that he did look at his place on YouTube and where he was going with his channel, expressed how he was feeling about that on his YouTube videos, and expressed his own misgivings as well as his positives about what he'd achieved through that. And I think if you do that to as big an extent as you can possibly can on any internet forum or platform where you make content, then you can ultimately improve your own content to the extent where you can survive in the long term, because adapting is the method towards survival, I think. You know, you can't just do the same thing forever without altering it, because ultimately you'll become either irrelevant or you'll just not fully realise your own potential. I think, fortunately for himself, Pyrocynical realised that after quite some time, late into 2016, and began to variate his content up a bit and change it around a bit. And I know a lot of people would prefer him to go back to gameplay commentaries. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed them as well myself, but I think he realised that they have a certain extension of shelf life, and some people can do them for an extended period of time, some can't. It depends on who the person is and how they do them. And I would like to see him do them now and again myself, but at the same time I think he did realise that he couldn't do them forever, and I have to applaud him for that. I know lots of people criticise the way that he makes content and how he clickbaits his titles, but I do think he was very adept in, well, adapting, and I think I have to applaud him for that. One person who I could use, though, as perhaps the opposite of that, and as a sort of counterpoint to sort of contextualise the argument I'm making here, that adaptation, self-recognition and hard work and editing is the way to go on online content platforms, is Leafy is here. Whereas Pyrocynical realised later on into 2016 that making highly edited content and varying up his content between gameplay, commentaries and other sorts of videos was the way to go. Leafy is here hasn't done that so much, I'll be perfectly honest. Now, I'm going to try my best not to go into some spiel about sort of beating him over the head, because at this point criticising Leafy's content as being stale and repetitive is somewhat of a dead horse, especially after the videos made by the likes of iDubbbz and that sort of crowd. But their points that they made about Leafy's style being stale and kind of repetitive is true. I mean, after the initial explosion of popularity that the man had in 2015, Leafy did at one point seem to be the next big hot thing after, say, KSI or PewDiePie or something in terms of majorly popular content creators here on YouTube. But whether it was due to iDubbbz's content cop on the man, or a general sentiment that was just catalysed by iDubbbz's content cop video on Leafy, people seem to begin to realise that Leafy's videos were quite repetitive and at some points even somewhat mean-spirited, and at other points very mean-spirited. I mean, the video he made a short time ago on Tanner Fox's rap video rightfully pointed out that Tanner Fox's rap was not particularly good. The one he made on Rice Gum, I believe. It wasn't very good, and I'll fully admit I don't think Tanner Fox's rap videos are particularly good, but that's kind of besides the point, because the extent to which Leafy went into criticising Mr. Tanner Fox in his video on the guy some time ago in regards to his rap video on Rice Gum was really quite mean-spirited, and regularly referenced to how ugly Leafy thought Tanner Fox was. And this is endemic of like one particular nasty aspect of Leafy's career. I think a lot of people have talked about, in that not only did he over time become seen as being stale and repetitive with how much he overused certain things like overly long transition slides and the word literally, but on top of that, he also seemed to, over time, get so stale and so into his rotor of doing things that he would just not realise the more poisonous aspects of his way of doing videos and how much they affected his content. And one way that affected, I think, his content is in the sense of how mean-spirited he would sometimes appear. Like with his video on Mr. Tanner Fox and his rap video on Rice Gum. Again, say what you will about the individual content quality of that video, but point stands that Leafy was remarkably mean-spirited in that video, and that really diluted the point he was making in that video, or the jokes he was making, to just being really kind of just pointless and kind of diluted down to just being statements of personal opinion rather than being actual criticisms of the videos he was looking at. Not only that, but he also consistently used the same kinds of jokes over and over again throughout his videos before his eventual downfall in popularity, and I think that kind of turned people off of his types of videos as well. Hence the reason why nowadays you'll still see a lot of gameplay commentaries, and they're done by people who can do them reasonably well, like Memulus and the like, but those people have to adapt their videos sometimes and not just do video game commentaries, and have to, even when they do those sort of videos, make them very, very well to an extensive level of quality, and that's just the way things are with that genre of YouTube now. I'm not going to say that Leafy is entirely blamed for this happening, this glut in the market for gameplay commentaries, but he at one point was easily the most popular pioneer of the topic, even though, you know, he of course didn't originate and be the progenitor of the genre. He did help popularise it, at least in early to mid 2016. But whether it was through repetition or consistent mean-spiritedness towards the subjects of his videos, he eventually started losing subscribers and views at quite an alarming rate, at least for him, and so he has eventually dropped off in popularity to quite a significant extent. He's still making videos consistently now, but they are still of the same quality, and they are getting less and less viewership, and I believe in large part that is not just down to, of course, the mean-spiritedness that I mentioned, but realistically, probably the main aspect of that is that he has not really adapted or developed his way of making videos in any real major way over the last 2 years, and that's kind of ended up really crippling his career as a whole, and not just on YouTube, but I would say as a internet personality. And especially after the videos that the likes of iDubbbz and Elvis the Alien made on him, that's, well, kind of scuppered him a bit, really, hasn't it? So I think, you know, if he does sort of adapt his videos and develop them a bit further and edit them down a bit more over the future, he could probably make a comeback, but at this point it's probably a bit late. So the point here is not just to, of course, develop your own content, recognise your own faults, edit your content very highly, and to a considerable extent take on criticism and all that. But it's also to recognise it at a good point. Don't let the issue of being repetitive or not improving get so extensive that you ignore it for ages. You know, it can be a bit uncomfortable sometimes to recognise those faults in your content if they are present at some point, but it's never the wrong time to, you know, just so long as it's not too late, I guess you could say. Sorry about getting a bit heavy on that one, but it has been something I've been thinking about for a while, and it's been something I've been paying a bit more attention to since I started doing more edited content on this video, particularly in regards to the gameplay specific videos like, you know, the Jedi Academy playthrough, the Dawn of War 2 playthrough, which I'm going to be getting back into continuing soon, and also other videos to do with, you know, like World of Tanks, Sniper Elite, Overwatch, and stuff like that. And I've enjoyed making these sort of videos more as I've started editing them down more and making sure that they're more succinct and less stuffy, I guess you could say. Because rewind back probably about, I don't know, let's say year and a quarter, year and a half, my videos would have regularly been in excess of 25 minutes long, and that's just the normal videos. And they would usually be quite hard sits because not much variation in editing would be put into them. And it's only really around halfway through doing my Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy playthrough that I realised, you know what, I could just do even just a bit of simple editing here, and this would probably be, you know, twice as watchable and half as long, and it would probably get more consistent views. And lo and behold, it did. And I feel a lot more proud of myself in terms of the content I've made for doing that sort of thing and recognising that, and then implementing that into the content I've made. And not just on YouTube, but also on blogger.com. Rewind back probably about, say, 4 or 5 years, and the posts I was doing at the time on, you know, say 2012, 2013 or 2014 maybe, on Blogger were considerably longer than they are now. They weren't as well edited, they had much less punctuation in them, and over time I started to enjoy making them less and less, and at one point I did even consider quitting Blogger. I'm not going to do that now because I've gotten back into it and I am enjoying it quite considerably, but there was a point at which I was considering that, and then I started taking more care and attention of what I wanted to write about on there, how well written my posts were, how well grammatized they were, what the punctuation was like, how I was presenting words, when I was putting in pictures into the articles. And I started not only enjoying reading them myself and looking at them afterwards after I'd finished them, but I also started to enjoy the process of making them as well. After I started implementing more grammatization, editing, punctuation, and attention to detail and things like that, it did take me a bit by surprise, because I was like, you know, I'm putting in more effort and more time and attention into this that should really be tiring me out more, but I'm also enjoying the process more as well as the end product. But I guess, you know, when you put more effort and such into the things you make, whether it be work, study, or things like, you know, online content, then chances are you will not just be more proud of it, you'll also probably enjoy it a bit more as well, I guess. I mean, granted, that might not be the case with everyone, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but I definitely feel that way about both my YouTube videos and my blogger.com articles, because once I started paying more attention to how I made them, the criticisms I was getting, and my own longevity in general on both platforms, the more I enjoyed the content I was making as well as the process of making it. And I think that's something that is maybe not necessarily something everyone should do, but it's definitely something that's helpful to recognise and helpful to, I would say, most people on the internet who create online content in at least a very general sense. And again, I'm just speaking mainly from my own experiences and also what I've seen of other content creators on both Blogger, YouTube, and other content creating websites. But take from that what you will and apply that to your own selves and see how it affects you. Because when I did, for me, it did help me out a lot, and I'm always grateful for views, likes, clicks, and whatever I get on any of my online platforms, and how, you know, taking more care and attention of like the content I've made has helped me do that. I think that has really helped me, and it's made me a little bit happier, even though I don't, you know, gain any money from doing online content at the moment, because I'm still very small in terms of my online presence on both Blogger and YouTube. I have enjoyed putting more effort into it, as well as the reception it's been getting. Even if I do get criticism sometimes, which I still do after having done YouTube for about 3.5 years and Blogger for about almost 6.5 years. it's a long process, is what I'm trying to get at. You're not always going to get compliments hit through and throughout. You are going to get criticisms a lot of the time, and granted, considering the internet is the internet, a lot of the criticisms you'll be getting on online forums and comment sections may just be mean-spirited toxicity, but that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes, like I said, in some of my videos from the last few months, I have gotten criticisms, but they've been very valid and reasonable and well thought out criticisms that I've taken to heart and have had a genuine hard think about. And to people who put criticisms like that towards me on either Blogger or YouTube, I am very thankful to you for raising those points up with me. Even if we don't necessarily end up agreeing, I at least enjoy the idea of reasonable, mature discourse on online forums and comment sections, and even in videos as well, because it's the best way to making better content with other people's input, is not just taking influence from their ideas, but also taking on criticisms you may get sometimes. Admittedly, I'm not saying like I said, don't take like criticisms like "lol, you're dumb" and stuff like that, because those kind of criticisms aren't really helpful, and they're probably not usually very well grammatized or thought out or put together or written or anything. But if, say, for example, you have a problem with sound design and the bass in your videos is really bad, but you don't necessarily recognize it at first, and then someone points it out, I would say that's the point of a reasonable criticism, especially if they do put it across in a mature, considerate and well thought out way, whether it be in a comment or a response video or something like that. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here generally is put a lot of effort into your content, learn to accept criticisms, and also differentiate between good and bad criticisms and ones that have been put to you well and not put to you in a good way. Learn to adapt sometimes, or at least recognise when is probably a good time to adapt. Don't do it too late if you are going to adapt. And also recognise when is a good time to change your ideas, as well as take influence from other people. Not, necessarily completely copy a person. Don't just completely plagiarise what they're doing, like, say, the irate gamer did to the angry video game nerd way back in the day. Don't just completely copy someone, but at least recognise when you think, hey, this person's ideas are quite good, maybe I should try putting my own spin on this. Because that might help you sometimes. I've certainly looked at content creators in the past where I've not necessarily liked their content, but I've liked some ideas that they've done, and I thought, how could I apply that to my own content? Should I apply that to my own content? How would other people, feel about replicating that, and how would they feel about receiving that, and all that sort of thing. And also recognise that while editing, recognising improvements and criticisms and general personal progression is all important to the process of making better content and a better online personality on the internet, whether it be on VidMe, YouTube, Twitter, or Blogspot. Also recognise that as much effort as you need to put in, you also need to consider a lot of time needs to be put into this sort of thing. Now, if you're someone who's already got a full-time job and stuff like that and is doing these sort of things at the same time, that is probably going to then mean that you're going to take a lot longer in this regard. And that's entirely fair enough. I think that's entirely fair if someone is in that situation, and they should be taken into consideration for that, or at least people should, realise that, hey, this person's making highly edited content, but they're also doing full-time uni or full-time job work, and okay, maybe they might take a bit longer to get together videos in general or improve their videos. So, alright, I'll take that into consideration and try and be, considerate as I can towards them in that regard. And I'm saying that not just in regards to people who are in that situation, but people in general. if you are thinking of getting onto YouTube or any other online platform, understand that your effort and time that you're putting into your content will not just happen overnight. You won't just improve and become a better content creator overnight. It will take quite some time and effort and development, and it sometimes can be a long, hard and arduous process that will sometimes stress you out a bit. I know it has, certainly towards me, but I'm eternally grateful for the lessons and hardships I've gone through due to that process, because it's ultimately taught me a lot more about not just the content I make on Blogger and YouTube, but also my own personal outlook on life and personality. And that's something that is not just valuable towards your own place on the internet, but also your general outlook on life and personality, and how you yourself work as a general person. As a general person, is that really a term of phrase, or did I just make that up on the spot? But you get my point, or at least I hope you guys do. And if you guys have any thoughts on that particular topic, leave it in the comments section below. Shut up, Discord. The other subjects I've got for this week are really just kind of like minor ones, to be honest. I started volunteering recently, and this kind of ties in actually to a little bit about what I was talking about applying for jobs in last week's podcast episode. In that, in order to get a higher quality job, it's very advisable to get good experiences in life, whether it be through apprenticeships or volunteering or things like that, or training or whatever you can do that's either generally relevant towards general transferable skills or relevant specifically towards the job area that you're wanting to go into. Now, myself, I'd quite like to go into analysing and archiving and things like that, particularly, or at least hopefully, in regards to the field of historical studies. And I recently started volunteering weekly at a local museum here in Brighton and Hove, doing or helping out with archiving in regards to street directories and accommodation censuses across not just Brighton and Hove, but also other sort of smaller, minor parts of East Sussex. And it's a long process of collecting and collating together these sort of lists of where people lived. Say for example, in North Street in Brighton between 1871 1889. It sometimes can take quite a while to put in this information, but it's stuff that I'm interested in, and it's stuff relevant towards the job field that I want to hopefully go into someday. And I've actually really enjoyed it so far. I've only done one volunteering shift so far there at the moment, and I do like it actually. It's been a good experience, and I'm gonna do my absolute darndest to try and do some more in the near future as well, because not only have I enjoyed it, but like I said, doing this sort of thing is helpful towards building up a good portfolio for going into further research opportunities or job fields in regards to what I want to do. And yeah, it's just, well, I mean, at least in regards to me, I find it interesting. I know not everyone is probably into studying things like archival censuses of where people lived in Brighton between the 1710s and the 1970s, but yeah, to each to their own, and the like. And in fact, actually, speaking of historical stuff, I recently, for the first time, saw the film Hacksaw Ridge with my good friend Philip, aka Flash Suppressor. He came around my house. We just had like some nice ready meals from Sainsbury's, had a few beers, ate some popcorn, and played some World of Tanks together. And we also watched on my laptop DVD that he brought round, which of course was Hacksaw Ridge. I'd never actually seen it myself, not even when it was out in cinemas a few months ago. So I was quite interested and happy that Phil had brought it round. I've got to say, I quite like it. It's a very interesting tale about the story of Desmond Doss, a soldier who joined up in the American Army from good old home down south the range in America. And what makes this story particularly interesting is that it's based on a real story, and that Desmond Doss joined the army, or joined the US Marines, despite being a conscientious objector, particularly on account of the fact that he was a very Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And that meant that he was very against the idea of eating meat. He didn't believe in violence, and he also didn't believe in killing people either. So he tried to join up to the American army as a medic, and initially was laughed at and very nearly fully court-martialed, but as did end up being the case, he ended up joining the American Armed Forces as a combat medic, and despite never carrying a weapon throughout the entirety of his service to his country, ended up being given a slew of very well-earned rewards and medals for his service. And the events that the film focuses on are probably the most famous account of his career during his time in the American Armed Forces, and I won't spoil it, I'll just leave it up to you guys to view for yourselves. And it is a fascinating tale as well, because I also recommend reading up on his story outside of the film as well, like the actual accounts of his life and his time in the American Armed Forces. Because, of course, considering it is a film made in Hollywood by Mel Gibson, who doesn't have the best track record with historical films, you've probably got to understand that this film does take some liberties. And I'm not saying that means it's a bad film. It is a good film, but just take it with a pinch of salt is all I'm saying. There are some bits, especially towards the end, where the film is, how shall we say, liberally dramatised. And there's also a bit in towards the middle of the film where a character goes on court-martial, which is another bit that is also very liberally dramatised. But it's still a solid film. It still recounts a very fascinating real-life tale of a fascinating man who is sadly no longer with us, because I would have loved to have met Desmond Doss and talked to him about his experiences, but I'd still recommend it. It's a good film. It's a good film. I may do a review of it on my blog on blog.com, because it is quality, and the actual story behind it is arguably even more fascinating into regards to how it happened and what the background behind it is. And the man himself is just fascinating, Desmond Doss. He really is quite a character when you look at both the film and the story of the man in reality behind it. In any case, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gitcast podcast. If I talk any further, I'll just be rambling, because I haven't really got any other major enough political points to make about anything, really. I wasn't really talking about politics. Well, I guess you could say I was getting a little bit political towards the end of talking about the YouTube stuff, but oh well, that's I didn't initially mean to get into that sort of aspect of it, but the conversation, I guess you could say, spiraled into that, so I guess you could say it was a little bit inevitable. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, share and subscribe, and if you didn't like the gameplay, then hopefully you just had it on in the background. I probably should have said that at the beginning of this episode, actually. I do usually do that at the beginning of these podcasts, and I should probably keep it to being that way, but I forgot this time, so I must apologise for that. But yeah, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. And if you didn't like it, then I hope you at least found it informative or helpful. If you want to show any extra support to me or my online presence, be sure to check out my other YouTube channels in the video description below, as well as, of course, checking out my Twitter and Blogspot as well, and other social media platforms. If you have any other suggestions for not just these podcasts, but other videos I should do on this channel, leave them in the comments section below, and I'll try and see what I can do. And until next time, stay safe, have fun with whatever you're doing, don't do anything I wouldn't do, and I've been Gitbag the Great, I should make that a bit more clearer. Sorry, kind of messed up my words there. But yeah, I'm Gitbag the Great. I'll see you guys next time on the battlefield. Bye bye for now.